Part 1, The Boy of Shadows. It began not with a brushstroke but with a shadow. In the crowded, twisting alleys of Edo, today's Tokyo, there was a child who never quite belonged. Born in 1760, Katsushika Hokusai was the son of a mirror maker, though whispers claimed his mother was a low-ranking servant. He grew up not in silk but in sawdust and smoke, surrounded by the restless heartbeat of a city that devoured the weak and ignored the poor. The boy's earliest memories were of water. Not oceans, he had never seen the sea, but the Sumida River rolling endlessly past the city's wooden bridges. He would sit for hours staring at the ripples, tracing their movements with a stick on the dirt. "The water moves and so do I," he whispered to himself. At 6 years old he was already drawing. Charcoal on scraps of paper. Ink on old packaging. His father sometimes caught him doodling instead of working. "Dreams don't feed the belly," the old man muttered. But the boy didn't care. He wasn't chasing dreams. He was chasing ghosts, visions only he could see. By the time he was a teenager he had been apprenticed to a woodblock engraver, one of the countless anonymous artisans in Edo's bustling publishing industry. His days were filled with dust, blades, and discipline. He learned to carve precise lines into cherry wood, to obey the brush, to worship perfection. But at night, when the lamps were low, he drew feverishly, dragons, demons, storm clouds, things no master had asked for. He was restless. He was hungry. And above all he was angry. Angry at the city that kept him small. Angry at the gods who had already taken his mother. Angry at himself for being ordinary when he could feel, deep in his bones, that he was not. He began to change names. A trick of survival, a mask for ambition. Hokusai would change his name more than 30 times throughout his life, each a rebirth, each a defiance of fate. "A name is only a costume," he once muttered. "The painter beneath is eternal." But eternity came with a price. Part 2, The Obsession. By his 20s, Hokusai had studied under masters of ukiyo-e, the pictures of the floating world. The city adored these prints, images of courtesans, kabuki actors, fleeting pleasures. They were entertainment, fashion, distraction. But Hokusai was not satisfied. He wanted storms, mountains, gods. He wanted the eternal, not the fleeting. His peers mocked him. "Why waste time painting waves when the people want women?" they sneered. But he didn't listen. He couldn't. At 30 his wife died suddenly. Poverty deepened. He was forced to sell belongings, even food, to keep painting. His children went hungry. One daughter ran away. Another, Oi, stayed, and became his apprentice, his mirror, his only true confidant. Together they worked in silence, the sound of their brushes like whispers in the dark. He moved constantly from one cheap lodging to another, sometimes chased by creditors, sometimes by demons of his own mind. Neighbors said he lived like a ghost, sleeping little, eating less, painting until his fingers bled. But the works began to emerge. Not portraits. Not distractions. Visions. Part 3, Storms on Paper. The turning point came not from wealth or patrons but from a storm. One summer evening while crossing the Sumida River, Hokusai saw thunder split the sky. The water below writhed, black and merciless. And in that moment he envisioned it, not just the storm but the eternal. The wave that could devour men, ships, entire histories. He rushed home, feverish. He sketched through the night, his hand trembling, paper soaked with sweat. What emerged was the seed of what would later become his most famous work, The Great Wave. But greatness does not come swiftly. 4 decades he struggled, moving from lodging to lodging, sometimes 30 times in a single life. Creditors hounded him. Fires destroyed his belongings. At one point he was so destitute he worked as a peddler, selling cheap sketches on the street. Yet even then his art was relentless. He filled sketchbooks with demons, dragons, waves, and mountains. His obsession crystallized into a series, 36 views of Mount Fuji. Why Fuji? Because it was eternal, sacred, unyielding. While men aged and cities burned, Fuji remained. He painted it from every angle, at dawn shrouded in mist, at dusk, burning in crimson light, in the rain and snow under stars. Each print was not just a mountain but a meditation on life and death. And among them, one image rose like a leviathan from the depths, the great wave off Kanagawa. The wave curled above helpless fishermen, its claws ready to crush them, dwarfing even Mount Fuji in the background. It was not just water. It was destiny. It was death. It was eternity devouring the moment. When it was published in the early 1830s, Japan froze. Some viewers trembled. Others whispered prayers. It was unlike anything the floating world had seen. Publishers who once mocked him now begged for his work. But Hokusai did not celebrate. He knew what the wave meant. "It is not the sea that destroys," he said quietly to Oi, staring at the print. "It is time." He was already in his 70s. And he was only just beginning. Part 4, The Old Man Mad About Painting. They called him Gakyo Rajan Manji, the old man mad about painting. By his 70s, most men in Edo slowed down, their backs bent, their hands trembling. But Hokusai only grew more feverish. He worked as if death were chasing him with every brushstroke. He believed that each decade only sharpened his vision. At 70 he said he finally understood a little. At 80 he would progress further. At 90 he would touch the divine. At 100 he would become a god himself. And if heaven granted him 110 years, everything, every dot and every line will be alive. But heaven is cruel. His poverty deepened. He lived in collapsing houses, sometimes with ceilings leaking rain onto his canvases. Fires consumed whole neighborhoods, and more than once his life's work turned to ash before his eyes. He moved over 90 times during his lifetime, dragging his scrolls, brushes and worn-out body from shack to shack. His daughter Oi remained his anchor. She too was a skilled painter, her brush fierce and precise. But society rarely acknowledged women as masters. She sacrificed much, marriage, comfort, her own recognition, just to remain at his side. Neighbors whispered she was as mad as her father. Perhaps she was. But she was also his only witness. One night, as the old man painted under the flicker of a single oil lamp, Oi asked him, "Father, when will you rest?" He did not look up. His hand shook slightly, yet his brush was steady. "When the gods allow me perfection," he murmured. "Not before." He painted dragons spiraling through skies, waterfalls collapsing like collapsing heavens, birds and flowers bursting with color. His late works possessed a violence, a vitality, that seemed to defy his failing body. Each line quivered with desperation, because he knew his time was running out. And yet his paintings grew calmer too. Not calmer in spirit but in clarity. Where once he fought the canvas like an enemy, now he commanded it like a general. His storms became symphonies. His waves became prayers. Part 5, The Last Ascent. The final years of Hokusai's life were a paradox, both destitute and eternal. His fame had grown beyond Japan. Dutch traders smuggled his prints to Europe, where they landed in the hands of men like Monet, Van Gogh and Degas. They marveled at his compositions, his lines, his daring use of space. But Hokusai never saw this. He remained in Edo, coughing blood into cloth, still painting. His enemies were no longer rival artists or poverty or fire. His enemy was time. At 88, he painted landscapes with a trembling hand but a mind as sharp as the blade of a sword. When friends visited, they found him muttering to himself. Not madness, prayer. He begged heaven for more years, more hours, more brushstrokes. "If only heaven will grant me 10 more years," he whispered one spring morning, "I shall become a true painter." But heaven again was silent. In 1849 Hokusai fell ill. He lay in a tiny, cluttered room, canvases leaning against every wall. His brushes were still within reach. Oi sat by his side, holding his hand though he barely noticed. His eyes kept drifting upward toward a corner of the ceiling. "What do you see, father?" she asked. His lips moved slowly, each word a trembling breath. "I see fields beyond this world, fields where everything lives forever." They were his last words. Katsushika Hokusai died at the age of 89. Outside, the city of Edo roared with life, oblivious. Inside, an empire of paintings remained, waves frozen mid-crash, dragons still circling the skies, Mount Fuji unmoving through the centuries. When his body was carried away, neighbors whispered that his soul had already risen, riding the crest of his own great wave.